Julius Malema ended his speech yesterday on a very interesting note with that quote from Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And today, when he was asked about Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, he had these remarks. Whoever is not here was not supposed to be here. One of the big questions surrounding this conference was the fate of Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. His name was one of the names that was being discussed as a potential for deputy president and even a future leader of the EFF. Now, his future within the EFF is very much up in the air. Nobody knows what's going to happen to him next. And Julius was asked directly about this, and this is what he had to say.
We're not going to answer the question about Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. You've got his number, and some of you talk to him, call him. I'm not responsible for Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. 90% of the people who are here, who expected to be here, are here. That's what matters. Whoever is not here was not supposed to be here from the beginning. So you are not going to reduce this organization to some individual without him. He's not here. I heard people say he's here, he's doing this. He's not here. He's not here. And it's not our interest to entertain such nonsense. It's not our interest. We're dealing with political issues here, not egoism, not people who think they are bigger than this organization. It will show them once again that it's bigger than all of them. So we as a matter of principle, SG and policy position, we're no longer going to answer any nonsense about Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. Never. When a journalist asks you that question, you must say, ask another question. You can be smarter than that. Ask something else. This matter is closed. You can talk about it amongst yourselves, but don't bring it to us. We are refusing that. Don't do that. Don't reduce the whole ideological political report to Sunday world gossip, because that's what they thrive on. And we know what is the relationship of Sunday world, its owners and Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. We don't want to talk about it. Don't push us. Don't push us. We know Mbuyiseni Ndlozi's friendship with the owner of Sunday World. And by that extension, we know his relationship with Sunday World.
Well. I think that says quite a bit. But before I talk more about Dr. Ndlozi and his future and the mistakes and where everything lies, let's understand or think about what the EFF was trying to and is trying to achieve with its National People's Assembly. Number one, they wanted to show organizational unity. They wanted to show South Africa and the world that they are still together, still unified, still working on their political aims and objectives, regardless of all of the disruptions that have occurred, regardless of some of the defections which have happened, which you will be aware of. Floyd Shivambu left, Advocate Busiwe Mkhwebane left, Zwanele Manyi left. These are some of the people who came, some of them came a little bit later, prominent leaders of the EFF. Advocate Dalimpofu left. So, and they all went to MK. So this is what has been happening. And they wanted to show the organization is resilient and united. That's number one. Number two, they wanted to show a level of professionalism and service at the conference. So who did they want to show this to? One, the world, but two, also like the media and other practitioners. When we were going to collect the accreditation to participate in this conference, everything was done smoothly. Your communication with the organization, seamless. The extra amount of attention that they were showing to journalists, seamless, world class. They were doing everything. The printing of tags, all of that stuff was being done in a well-coordinated fashion so that they can demonstrate that the EFF is a mature organization and the EFF is an organization that is able to operate as a corporate entity, so to speak. This issue of service is something that even was being displayed to the delegates themselves, the voting delegates. The EFF got, I think, what I would call medium luxury buses, right? Not too luxurious, not like, Intercape, Sleepliner type of buses, but they got respectable, well-resourced, and comfortable buses for their delegates. So when you were looking at the delegates arriving, etc., you could see that no, these guys were treated as adults, as professionals, as career politicians, as people who are working as councillors, who are branch, leaders, etc. So that level of professionalism and service is something that they wanted to demonstrate, that, listen, we are not running a Mickey Mouse operation. No disrespect to Mickey Mouse and Disney for anybody who has kids. So they wanted to show that, not a Mickey Mouse operation, right? So I think they achieved that. They also wanted to rebut arguments which are being made about the merger with MK. And they did that through Sihle Lonzi's speech. Nobody just gives a speech at a conference at that level. That argument around we can't do this in a boardroom when we built it on the street, we can't merge in a boardroom when we built this on the street, that was deliberate. That was not accidental at all. It was very important for them to make that case so that South Africans would understand why they don't want to merge with MK. Cheers. I'm just kidding. I'm playing. They also wanted to demonstrate something that was very important. This is the fourth thing that they wanted to show. Ideological consistency. In his 3.5 hour speech, Julius spent a large part of that speech giving a political lecture on Marxism, Leninism, leftist politics, progressive politics. What he wanted to show is that Floyd Shivambu is not the only person with an intellectual grasp of these issues, and that the EFF is not going to suffer a loss intellectually because Floyd Shivambu has left. He wanted to make it clear that he too has an understanding of Marxist, Leninist, Fanonian, Bikoist thinking, and that they have enough scholarship within the EFF to continue without Floyd. They wanted to actually put across to the organization that not only do we still have mastery over this particular type of content, but we have the most ideological consistency when it comes to progressive policies, thinking, and ideologies, which is why he spent some of his speech then saying, being black doesn't make you progressive. Saying particular things doesn't make you progressive. You need to be evaluated on a variety of elements in order to be progressive. The EFF is making a direct play for the left, and they're trying to say, we are the real custodians of leftist politics in South Africa. That's something that they wanted to put across very clearly, and that's why he spent a lot of his speech putting that type of political science scholarship front and center. The fifth thing that they wanted to show was that no one man is bigger than the organization. And this is where the Ndlozi thing comes into play again. They wanted to make it clear that regardless of an individual's popularity, regardless of an individual's respect, regardless of an individual's fondness in terms of how we may feel about Ndlozi and, our viewpoints on him, that he's not bigger than the EFF. And this is the way that they chose to demonstrate it, by removing him altogether from the conference, to show that conference can continue, leadership can be elected without Ndlozi. So fundamentally, this confirms the reporting from Sunday World, and maybe even the insinuation that the inside source who gave the reporting to Sunday World was Ndlozi himself, right? So it's confirmed. I was skeptical. I didn't think that the reporting was accurate. Sunday World had just taken an L in that other reporting the previous time when they said that, MK was being discouraged from electing Floyd Shivambu as the Secretary General. Then he was. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to discount your reporting a little bit moving forward. But Sunday World, you're back up. Your reporting was accurate. My bad. I had reasons to doubt you. Now I'm going to have to moderate my reasons to doubt you with this credible reporting that you have now shown us, right? So the reporting is confirmed. He is missing. He has been either suspended or expelled, or he's absent without leave. One of those things is true. He still hasn't given us his own views. He hasn't clarified things. This is Ndlozi. Lots of opportunities to clarify, he hasn't yet clarified. So that's something that he will have to do. Now, how did we get here? What mistakes were made? Number one, I think the first mistake was that Ndlozi's wife liked a comment or post by Floyd Shivambu, or was it by Dalimpofu? I'm not sure, Advocate Dalimpofu, at a critical moment. And I think that sent shockwaves throughout the organization because they seem to have political sympatio. They go together politically. Not necessarily that they're all going to contest for leadership positions in the EFF per se, but it seemed as if this was the thinking of the household as opposed to her own views. And he had an opportunity to come and correct that immediately, and I don't think that he did so fast enough. And he seemed to be taking a back seat at a critical moment, right? The critical moment where right now Floyd Shivambu leaves, Advocate Dalimpofu leaves, Busiwe Mkhwebane leaves, Mzwanele Manyi leaves, you keeping quiet. That's a moment when one of the strongest public speakers in the organization needs to be going on every platform to be taking shots at those who are leaving the organization. But it looks as if Ndlozi was still weighing his options, or maybe he was still actually waiting to then make the last grand exit. And what the EFF has effectively done is to deny him that last grand exit opportunity. Or maybe he was hoping that he could get DP and then push from the DP position for an EFF-MK merger, right? Whatever, those things are not likely to happen in the way that he had planned. He kept quiet at the wrong time. Then the other thing that hurt or caused problems is that, firstly, Floyd said he had told people in the organization. This now leads to a rational conclusion to be that he told Mbuyiseni. Because Julius said he didn't know that Floyd was leaving. But Floyd said people knew in the organization. So he may have been referring to Mbuyiseni knew. Then Floyd later on said, no, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi is my close friend. He's a brother. You know, whenever Floyd Shivambu calls you a brother, it's a question mark. What kind of a brother? Because he said Julius was his brother. Then later on he said, no, gangsters and all of that. So anyway, aside from that, let's assume he was being sincere in this instance. He said, no, Mbuyiseni is my close friend and brother. We're like brothers. We've known each other for decades, back to Wits, etc., etc. When he said that, that then puts eyes on Ndlozi. And Ndlozi still doesn't come out properly to then say, listen, I'm with these guys, we're moving, etc., etc. He's very tepid, very lukewarm. And to be lukewarm in a time of conflict, a time of crisis, when you are one of the stakeholders, one of the big brands, one of the big names in an entity, doesn't reflect well on you. So it seems as if to me that Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, Dr Ndlozi, miscalculated, because he may have wanted to leave with Floyd. But remember what happened is that Jacob Zuma wasn't a big fan of the whole everyone leaving at once. He wanted the gradual departures to create that narrative of boardroom or executive collapse within the EFF. Because if you basically, it's like that law that Sun Tzu spoke about, you know, that the greatest victory is the one that you win without having to fight. So if you create an impression that all of the top leaders of the EFF are now joining your entity, then the grassroots of the EFF may feel that they don't have an option and they'll also join your entity. Then you get the whole EFF, 1.5 million voters, without having to go directly to conflict with them. So as opposed to Floyd and Advocate Dalimpofu and all of these people leaving at the same time, the strategy that MK seems to have preferred is that one leaves, then you wait. Then another leaves, then you wait. Then another leaves, then you wait. Then another leaves, then you wait. And then it creates that constant media crescendo around departures, 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 departures. So Ndlozi was supposed to fit in somewhere there, but it didn't actually play out the way that they thought it would play out. And obviously now the EFF took some counter strategies as well and tried to say, okay, if this guy is not going to be with us, we have to find a way to sideline him and also not give him access to our microphone, our audience, our platform, our resources, while he is working with his friend and brother Floyd Chivambu to actually take over the organization in a non-democratic process, really, because they have a conference coming up. So whenever you have a conference coming up as an organization, you're very vulnerable to these kind of games and political machinations, right? And EFF is an entity that directly elects its leaders through this conference. Whether you think that's, maybe choreographed or whatever the case may be, they do it. They are voting for their leaders. So it looks as if it's failed. So what are Dr. Ndlozi's options now? He's not on zero. He still has a lot of options because he has built his brand within the EFF and nationally. When he joined the EFF, very few people knew who Dr. Ndlozi was. I knew him from Wits, but very few people knew who he was. So now he's a household name. He's known all across the country, People's Bay, whatever. People know him, right? He has cachet, brand cachet. So he has options. He can either go into academia and lecture political science. He has a PhD in politics. That's something that many universities are going to be happy to take him, work with him in that capacity. MK, if he joins now, I think it will be the worst of all worlds because it will prove the EFF's argument to say, okay, we showed you about this guy, but also at this particular point, I'm not sure there's a position for him in the MK. I don't think he'll be able to get into the parliamentary benches. I don't think he'll be able to get a senior position within the party proper. And as a result, then you just become a backbencher or just a pure supporter. So that's the worst of all worlds, to be quite honest. And I don't know if he'll take that now. I think the bus may have left him, the MK bus. He has an interesting option, which you may not have thought of. ANC. The ANC is in trouble. The African National Congress, they're in trouble. If Ndlozi goes there and says, listen, I know how to fight the EFF, I know how to revitalize, I've been working on the ground, put me on the team. This is something that I think many ANC leaders may think is a viable strategy to consider. And they may view him as having capacity to bring back some young voters from the EFF to the ANC. I mean, the other parties are really not really much of an option for him because he has far left political positions. So DA, RISE, Build One South Africa, these are not really options for him. So his options are either academia, MK, or ANC. And ANC may be a really attractive option for him. And their conference is still 2 years away, so he may be able to maybe find a position within the NEC and then, reset his political career that way. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's crazy? ANC. People compare him to Mbeki a lot. Many people who miss Thabo Mbeki and are looking for a younger Thabo Mbeki, they see that in Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, and maybe he can deliver that, that intellectual, not so aggressive political brand of discourse. Maybe Ndlozi can bridge that gap because right now the ANC doesn't have strong intellectuals. If you think about the names that are being discussed for the next conference, you've got in terms of leadership, you've got Fikile Mbalula. I don't think anybody considers Fikile Mbalula an intellectual. You've got Oscar Mabuyane, but he's being accused of having fraudulently gotten his academic qualifications. You've got Stella Ndabeni Abrahams. She just recently got a master's, but I don't think she's considered on the same level as Dr. Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, partly because of her master's is just new and he has had a PhD for a very long time, but also because of his public-facing presentation skills. He has lots of, public speaking skills and competencies in debating that very few people can go toe-to-toe with him on. Then you've got not is it Doctor? No, he's not. Panyaza Lusufi. He's somebody who has been in education, but is not considered a scholar. He comes from a media background. And then, Paul Mashatile, also not considered to be an academic. Ronald Lamula, he's a lawyer, but he's not necessarily considered to be a scholar per se. So if you think about what value proposition does he have? He can bring scholarship to the ANC, and he may very well end up becoming an ANC, NEC member and maybe occupy the benches of the ANC. I think that's something that could happen. His final option could be to stay in the EFF, take this L, rebuild his relationships with all of the people within the party, apologize, and really, as they say, ahlale phansi ibambe umthetho, ahlale phansi abambe umthetho, and then see whether or not the organization is willing to forgive him. Those are really the options that I think are available for him. The EFF has demonstrated now that they're going to push ahead, that the leadership is going to be that of Julius Malema, and that they're going ahead with that leadership. I don't know if there's going to be space for Dr Ndlozi in future. But you know what? In reality, if Julius forgives him, if they fix that relationship, he'll be okay. Towards the end of his speech yesterday, Julius did show that he was very hurt and broken by some of the stuff that happened in the last few months. And when he was speaking about his grandmother and how he wants to be buried in that EFF flag, etc., all of the fighters in the room were standing in solidarity with him, with his pain. And that showed that, those who are viewed as having betrayed the EFF within that organization are going to have a tough time. So I don't know if Ndlozi will be willing to do that kind of work and to rebuild, but those are really his options going forward. I don't know what you think about the conference as it's ongoing. I'm about to head back in, and they're about to do the nomination of the leaders. I think it's a foregone conclusion. We'll see Julius Malema as president, Goodrich Gadi as vice president, deputy president. And I think that's going to be the lineup. What do you think, though? Let's have a conversation. Till the next one.